All right, great. Welcome everyone to this public hearing via Zoom with the Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission members about our proposed unity maps that we released to the public yesterday, our proposed maps before we come together to adopt those as our final maps of the commission. I'm Kathleen Clyde. I am the co-chair of this commission, along with Greg Moore, who looks like he is signed on. I know he's having some technical difficulties, totally understandable. Greg, if you're able to and want to give a quick welcome and say a few words, we'd love to have you do that. All right, let's, Greg, chime in anytime once we get your, you signed in. With that, what I'd like to do, before I do a brief presentation of the maps, just to go over what we're here talking and gathering input about, I just want to ask our Vice Chair, Janice Brock, if you'd like to say anything, give an update, and then we'll get into the presentation and the soliciting of feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chair Clyde. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'll be really quick. I just want to give a quick update for the commission and the audience. Yesterday, which was August 25th, the Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission released their long-awaited unity maps to the public, which are two ideal composite legislative maps of Ohio collectively gathered from the input of thousands of Ohioans eager to participate in the redistricting process. These maps are accumulation of a 4-month-long process led by the OCRC, which is a volunteer-led commission of Ohio grassroots and grassroots top leaders and citizens pushing for fair representation in their communities. I'll share some main takeaways from the press conference, and then I'll hand it back over to Chairwoman Clyde to really dig into the details here. The OCRC unity maps break down into state house. For the state house, we have 44 Democratic seats, 55 Republican seats. For the state Senate, there are 15 Democratic seats. There are 18 Republican seats. And there's another layer to this, which is minority opportunity districts. For the state house, there are 12 minority opportunity districts. And for the state Senate, there are 4 minority opportunity districts. The OCRC maps keep communities together and follows the rules laid out in the Constitution, preventing the unnecessary splitting of communities, municipalities, and townships. Thank you so much, everyone, for your input, and I'll turn it right back over to Chairwoman Clyde to really dig into the details here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Vice Chair Brock. And thanks to all the commissioners who are here and present. We, of course, are soliciting feedback for our commission from the public, but would also love any feedback that each of you may individually want to offer now that we've had some more time to digest and hear from members in our communities who may have given us feedback about the maps that we can share with each other. With that, I'm going to give a brief presentation and then put the maps up, and then we will proceed into that discussion and feedback portion. So if the staff could put the presentation, share the screen with the presentation. All right, moving on to the next slide. Again, and this is just the background about all the requirements that our map carefully was drawn to meet. And the first requirement is that we are following federal law with the map. And the Voting Rights Act of 1965 requires that legislative districts must be drawn in a manner to ensure that voters of color can elect representatives of their choosing. So in our map, to ensure compliance with the Voting Rights Act, our House map has 12 minority opportunity districts. What that means is we have 12 districts with a Black voting age population of at least 30%. Then we have 2 additional seats on our House map that are within 2% of that 30% threshold. And just to give you a sense, 30% is the floor. There are districts that go much further in their minority representation, but it kind of runs the gamut. 30% is the bottom of those 12 districts. Then when we look at our Senate map, we have 4 minority opportunity districts with 2 additional districts that are within 2% of the minority opportunity threshold. So this is how we will ensure that voters of color can elect representatives of their choosing, and how our map meets that important requirement. Next slide. So the Ohio Constitution then has a set of requirements. And of course, we all remember these requirements are all laid out in the amendment to the Constitution that Ohio voters overwhelmingly adopted in 2015. So the Constitution, this may not be the topic that gets all the discussion, but of course, we need to have equal population in our 99 House districts and 33 Senate districts. So the way that number is determined is you divide the 2020 census total population by 99 for House seats and by 33 for Senate seats. And you must meet that number plus or minus 5%. So our map, of course, uses 2020 census data, and it achieves that equal population requirement. For House districts, that means we need 113,317 to 125,245 persons in each House district. And then each Senate district contains between 339,000 and 375,000 persons to make sure we meet that equal population requirement. Next up is the representational fairness requirement that is in the Ohio Constitution. This is such a key part to the reform as it was adopted in 2015. What the Constitution lays out is that the partisanship of Ohio's map overall should reflect the overall partisanship of Ohio voters. How do we get that number of the overall partisanship of Ohio voters? Well, we add the presidential races, US Senator, Governor, Secretary of State, Auditor, Attorney General, and Treasurer over the last 5 general elections, which is the last 10 years between this census and the prior census. And we see that by adding all of those races up, Republican candidates received 54% of the votes cast by Ohio voters, while Democratic candidates received 46% of the votes cast. Therefore, the makeup of Ohio's districts on partisanship should closely reflect that 54%, 46% ratio. Our House map has 55 Republican leaning districts and 44 Democratic leaning districts. That ratio is a touch off. It's 56% Republican and 44% Democratic, but it is very, very close. Our Senate map has 18 Republican leaning districts and 15 Democratic leaning districts for a 55-45% ratio. Again, very close to that 54-46 number. Now, of course, these districts are not all slam dunk Republican or slam dunk Democratic. They really, to be a Democratic district or a Republican district, that means that in all of these races, the composite that we used, they're 50% plus one to be labeled Democratic or Republican, depending on how they swing, up until some districts are much more Democratic or much more Republican. That's just sort of the nature of how the redistricting process works. But that's how the overall breakdown works, and that's how we meet that constitutional requirement for representational fairness. Next slide. The other requirements in the Constitution, not to be forgotten, General Assembly districts shall be compact and contiguous. Both our Senate and House maps meet this requirement. And then for those of you familiar with how the General Assembly works, of course, there must be 3 nested contiguous House districts within each Ohio Senate district, and our Senate map meets this constitutional requirement. So next slide. And here are the maps. So looking at our Ohio House map and Ohio Senate map, again, this reflects the equal population requirement, the requirement of keeping communities together. We did not break a single rule laid out in the Ohio Constitution about splitting counties, townships, or municipalities and drawing these maps. And then we meet that representational fairness requirement by having the 44 Democratic, 55 Republican in the House map. And then in the Senate map, it's 18 lean Republican, 15 lean Democratic in the Senate map. And you can kind of see the variations if you look at the key where the districts are closer to that 50% line. They're the lightest shaded districts. And then kind of you can see the gradation and the shading on the partisanship. I'm not sure if we have the slide that zooms in on the House map. Oh, good, we do. So this, because the House map is hard to see, we did a zoom in on the 3 counties with the most House districts in them. Of course, those are Franklin, Hamilton, and Cuyahoga County. So if you take a look at how those districts are drawn, again, they meet the requirement of keeping municipalities, townships, and counties together. And this is also where many of the Democratic districts are that help achieve that overall representational fairness requirement. If you just look at the maps, it's easy to forget how population density is throughout Ohio. So it looks like, wait a minute, this is a fairly even split. It looks very red, but that's because of the population in our urban counties and the larger number of districts that are in these counties based on their population. So with that, I would love to zoom back out on the screen share. We can come back to this map, and if the staff could don't keep it up, but just keep it handy with both the House and the Senate map if we need to look at those for questions and feedback. But that ends the presentation. And at this time, we would like to hear questions from the public that may be joining us. And also we can hear feedback from commission members that you've heard from the people you've talked to in the time that we release these maps, and any questions that you may have as well. So let's take a moment and see if there are any questions from the public. Janice, help me out if I'm wrong here, but my guess is that the public can chime in on the chat if they have a question, or the Q&A function, and we can answer their questions and keep an eye on that as we go forward.
A question I also ask you and Janice, how is the public accessing these maps at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. On the website, on the OCRC website, so it's ohredistrict.org, there is a tab that says Unity Maps. You can click on that and then view the maps.
Okay.
And to answer the question, I had to check with the team behind the scenes first. I want to make sure I'm doing this in order, but it looks like we can, if folks have questions, if you can use the question and answer tool, and from there, we'll be able to make sure everybody's question is addressed.
Great.
I don't have a question, but I did want to make a comment if I could.
Please. Thanks, Greg.
First of all, glad to be where you can hear me. I did get some feedback this week from some of our allied partners. I won't go into their names, but they did suggest that they would like to probably see some of the back presentation that you just gave today to us, as well as some of the background data on minority representation. That seems to be a major concern. So the way it was explained today, I think, is what people are looking for. And also on process, the question would be whether or not the sign off on these maps would be taking place before or after September 1st, or before, or what that timeline might be, and what is the process for people giving input to their reaction to the maps and to the criteria.
That's great feedback, Greg, and I'll say a couple of responses. One, I think that we will continue to push information out about these Unity maps, and I think too, focusing in on some of the key areas, like we've presented the maps, we gave an overview, but there's still, I think, confusion about, what does representational fairness mean, or what are the, where are the minority opportunity districts, et cetera. So making sure that we continue to put out information, make that available, and go into areas where, we identify that more feedback is needed. So I'd like to see us do that. And, we'll take that to heart and think of ways we can continue to convey that type of information. Again, talking about the 30% threshold, for example, some of the districts are over 50%. They're majority minority districts. And right now, I think that is not necessarily clear to the public which districts those are. So we will work to get as much information as we can out about these maps. And of course, it will be included when we present to the Ohio Redistricting Commission and in our report about our maps. So that is forthcoming. We are soliciting feedback via this hearing tonight, via another hearing tomorrow night, virtual hearing via Zoom. We're pushing out information to ask folks to join us and give feedback. 5:30 p.m. Tomorrow evening. Happy Friday, fun for everyone. And then we also have put our email address out, and if people cannot attend a hearing or don't want to speak at a hearing, we are soliciting feedback via email, written comments that we will go over closely before we finalize the maps. So those are the opportunities. Anything that commissioners can do to amplify those opportunities for people to give feedback, that would be great. And then again, we will be presenting to the commission, and we will have the vote on our maps on Sunday, which is before September 1st, the deadline in the Ohio Constitution. Any other questions or feedback?
We do have some questions in the chat that I've put in the chat.
All right. Looking at the rules about splitting municipalities. Is that all in Article? It's not. It is all in the Constitution. I don't believe that's the right article number. But it is the section, newly amended section of the Constitution where it specifically lays out the requirements about keeping counties, municipalities, and townships together. Those are fairly detailed rules. And I'm looking for the section number. And we will go into this in our report.
Kathleen, it's Article 11, Section 3 for requirements for drawing House of Representative districts, and Section 4 for the requirements for drawing Senate districts. And I'll put the link in the chat box in just a second.
Great, thanks, Katie. Moving on. Yeah, so we have a question about kind of focusing in on the maps and the urban areas and how we made those decisions. The map that we have showing the House districts the urban counties shows that in the most detail. It is fairly complicated how the rules were followed in those areas, but we can try to prepare a summary kind of explaining what those rules are and how they were followed. Katie, I don't know if you feel that you could, I know you know these splitting rules probably better than anyone here. If we put the slide up with the 3 urban counties, could you kind of just explain in brief how those splitting rules work?
Sure,
Okay.
and I can actually do it without the maps because the rules sort of fall into a couple different categories depending on the size of the city or county that you're talking about. So just in general, the way that House districts have to be drawn is that, especially for the major counties and counties that have a population that is bigger than 105% of your target population of a House district. So I'm going to zoom back out and say, what's target population of a House district? You take the whole population of the state, you divide it by 99 because that's how many House districts we have. And that number is your target number for how many people should live in every Ohio House district. Then though, the Constitution allows for there to be plus or minus 5% of that number on either side of your population. So you can have a variance, a difference in population that's either 5% higher than the target or 5% lower, but no more, because your goal is to try to get districts about as equally populated as possible. So now that you know what a target population is, if you have counties that are bigger than that 105%, so if you look at Franklin County, obviously we've got a lot more than just one whole House district. There are about 10 House districts in Franklin County. You try to divide the county into as many whole House districts as you can contain within the county boundary. So inside the rectangle of Franklin County as you can. And then whatever is left over, you're allowed to connect to just one adjoining district. So you can only have one district that goes out to a different county or different counties. And then the goal inside the county is to try to minimize how many sort of sub-communities you are splitting apart. There are exemptions for rules against splitting apart, especially the major cities, because if you take Columbus, for example, we're a city of 900,000 people. So obviously you have to split us apart into different districts. So you're allowed to split Columbus, of course, into those seats. But then outside of that, you have to try to minimize how often you're splitting apart other cities that are smaller than that. And then when it comes to counties that are smaller, are in between that 95 and 105% of the target population, those whole counties have to house their own House district. So the idea there is that you're trying to keep counties that are essentially the size of one House district as a House district. So that's how you sort of offload other parts of the population in the state. So especially in the rural areas, it's a lot easier to see entire counties included either in their entirety within districts or just being their own House district because of their population size. And then the rest of the state, it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. So the rest of the little pieces and parts that are smaller below that 95% mark, those get drawn into other districts to combine them together to make districts out of where the rest of the population is.
Great, thank you, Katie. I think that's very helpful. Let's pull out of the map a question about, do we have a recommended map that preserves compactness and competitiveness? This is our recommended map that meets the compactness requirement under the Ohio Constitution. And then competitiveness is not a constitutional requirement. However, there are a number of competitive districts in our map. And those would be the ones, again, we shaded red and blue, not because those districts are unwinnable by a different party, but because the number of districts that are over 50% Democratic on a typical performance and then over 50% Republican are shaded, but there are wide variations within those districts that include varying levels of competitiveness. So there are a number of competitive districts contained in our map.
Kathleen, can you give us an example of a couple of those counties or those districts that are competitive? Just
Yeah,
off the top of your head?
yeah, of course. Let's pull up the House and Senate maps. So Andre, any of the maps that are lighter colors are the most competitive. And then the next sort of shade, which is quite a bit darker, but is still fairly competitive. I know, for example, the House map, if you look at the Athens seat, the composite for that seat is 50%, and it doesn't even get to 51%. It's right about 50% and a few tenths. So that technically is a Democratic district, but that is certainly a district that it would be highly competitive. If you look in the Mahoning County up in Northeast Ohio, where you have a darker blue, slightly darker blue, and then lighter blue within the district bordering Pennsylvania, that county has two Democratic leaning districts, but they are both very competitive, one slightly more than the other, as you can see by the shading. The most Democratic leaning competitive districts are in Northeast Ohio. Then there are Republican leaning districts that are competitive also in Northeast Ohio. I'm in Portage County, so Portage County is a lean competitive Republican district. Over in Wood County, neighboring Lucas County, competitive lean Republican seat. And then on the Senate map, there are 4 very competitive districts, and then a number that are still pretty competitive based on their shading.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next question, I'm just looking in the chat. Question on showing a version of the maps that can zoom in at the street level. We will work on that. We don't currently have that available, but that is something that we can work to make available as soon as possible. And I anticipate we would have that available, especially when we present to the full commission. That kind of answers the question too about zooming in.
One quick note that I'll also say is that I know that certainly, you know, we talk a lot about the snake on the lake and the duck district. So much of our vocabulary about how to describe districts is based on what they look like. And sometimes it's easy to see a gerrymander. But I do just want to come to the defense of map drawers, because the municipal boundaries in this state are wild and they are not straight lines, especially when you're looking at major cities that have incorporated a lot of those smaller towns or villages or townships. So sometimes the district will look really wonky, but we're actually following municipal boundaries. And that's on purpose to make sure that we are keeping together communities as much as possible. So, you know, just to reiterate what Kathleen said, certainly we can get maps where we can zoom in on more detail, but I just want to come to a quick defense of those hardworking map jars that sometimes the squiggly lines does not mean a gerrymander, it just means you're following the existing official boundary that exists for a county or a city or a township or a smaller political subdivision.
Thanks, Katie. That's helpful. Answering Representative Jessica Miranda's question about a municipality breakdown. Again, I know we've kind of covered that, but we will make that available. Do keep in mind the requirements of not splitting municipalities that we have followed as laid out in the Constitution. And currently in our current map, the one that we're suffering under today, there are all kinds of fragments of municipalities, especially in Hamilton County and in our urban counties in Ohio. And this map, because it follows the requirements in the Constitution, again, eliminates most of that, except where it's unavoidable, which is envisioned in the Constitution, because there will be minimal places where it's necessary, and that's the only time this map has those types of fragments. But we will make that available, and again, appreciate the questions and can understand why this information is important to folks. Let's take the slide down for a moment. This is a question that I've actually received via Twitter too, about can we do an overlay to compare these maps to what we are living under today? We can do that. And we also have put out some information about the extreme partisan gerrymander under the current map today, and the effort to achieve representational fairness and dramatically decrease that partisanship problem that we have. So that information we've made available. Again, everyone here likely knows, we have super majority Republican majorities in both the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate. And that is way out of line with a 46% partisan breakdown. So that's one way without an overlay that you can tell our map is so much different. But we can work to make that available to folks as well. I think that would be a helpful visual for the public. So thanks for that important feedback. Okay, continue to ask questions if you have them. Let me make a call to commissioners. Any comments or feedback that you all would like to provide?
I have several. One is to that last question. I would recommend that we stick to MAP's fairness, the positive aspects, and not try to defend them as that person was asking for. But that's just for me. The question I would have, since we followed all the rules, we've done everything the right way, as you and Katie and Kathleen have pointed out, the recommendations we get, they shouldn't change the makeup of the maps much, should they?
Probably not, depending on what that feedback is. Also, I find that a lot of the feedback we're getting are just questions and ways that we can kind of better show, what the Constitution requires now and how we met that. So I think, I don't know what the Ohio Redistricting Commission will do to help the public understand what's in the Constitution and how showing our work. But I think we could do a real service to provide that. But that's a very good point, Tom. It would be hard for us to make many changes, although we certainly are open to hearing input from folks and thinking that through.
Yeah, I had a similar question to Tom's, or kind of a follow-up. And that is, this is a very complex map and it has to meet a lot of criteria. And so what are the chances that there could be another map that would meet all of these criteria, given the complexity? And maybe you don't know the answer to that, but I would think it would be fairly small, that there's not a lot of give and take in terms of all the requirements that have to be met. Is that accurate?
I think that is very accurate. I will say it was very difficult to draw, not difficult to draw the map, but there is not a lot of wiggle room in the map as far as following both the representational fairness and the keeping communities together strict requirements in the Constitution. I will say the hardest objective to achieve, in my sort of educated through this process a couple of times now opinion, I'm not a map drawer, but I provide a lot of input to very skilled map drawers, is the representational fairness requirement was the toughest to meet. The way the communities must not be split apart, makes it very difficult to achieve a partisan split that reflects the partisanship of Ohio. However, we as a commission with various people who were deeply involved with that reform, and are students of it, and of the citizens that we represent, know how important that representational fairness element of the reform was. So, we worked incredibly hard to get that number, and I showed you it's not exact. We lean a touch Republican on both maps, but it would be very hard to draw the map much differently than what we put forward without violating the Constitution. And to our commission, that was incredibly important. And we hope it is also important with the official Ohio Redistricting Commission. And if so, their map should look similar.
I'll say too that another challenge in Ohio, quite frankly, is our political geography. So there are just places in the state where you can't avoid drawing districts that are either heavily Republican or heavily Democratic. Now, obviously, that in terms of trying to achieve the goal of actual representational fairness and drawing maps by the numbers that give seat counts that actually reflect the partisan makeup of our state is more difficult for the Democratic side than it is for the Republican side, just because of where we happen to live. And I know that that's a talking point that a lot of reasonable people disagree about, but when you're talking about, for example, there are districts in Cleveland where you cannot avoid drawing districts that are very high Democratic districts and also have very high Black population specifically, but that's because that's who lives there. And so what we tried to do was walk a very important line between unnecessarily packing voters into districts, but also ensuring that you were spreading voters out as much as possible while also not unnecessarily carving them apart, right, and diluting their votes. So there's a lot of competing interests that have to be equally considered and analyzed when you're drawing those maps. So especially in those major cities, of course, I'm sure folks are going to have opinions, and we welcome certainly their feedback about how better we could have represented their communities. But that's another challenge because unfortunately you cannot place the representational fairness objective above the rules against splitting apart communities. And so, that's something that maybe reasonable minds would differ about, but that's what the Constitution requires us to do. So we're also boxed in just by what the requirements are. So we could pin this for a conversation on another date about maybe how better we could write the Constitution reforms to give us a better guideline for how to draw maps. But I think we did our best to maximize legitimate political representation that's actually reflective of our political performance over the last decade, but which also strives very seriously to decrease how often we're carving apart our communities.
I could just follow up on that. Some of the feedback I received was from allied groups who want to see a little clearer what the minority representation breakdown is for both the House and the Senate seats. I think once we can get that information to folks that's not necessarily tied to partisanship breakdown, I think it helps them sell that argument better to some of their leadership. So again, if we could, I don't know if that was in the memo or one of the breakdowns, but I know it did come up during the map drawing conversation. That information is readily available, but for some folks, they need to see that to know what percentage they're looking at for each particular district. I'm assuming that's something we can do.
It definitely is, Greg, and we were working to get it out yesterday, and we just kind of ran up against the clock in our map drawers, but such good feedback. That information needs to get out there. I think it will. I think information is power. And I think once we get it out there, it will build more confidence in these maps and what we're striving to do and how we meet the very important, requirements in the Voting Rights Act, and are balancing the need to make sure we have strong minority representation. So I think that we can get something out on that very soon. And hopefully at our hearing tomorrow night, we may even have put some information out there and can hear more feedback on it then.
Kathleen, I think several of you have done some fantastic work. So I don't want to give any more work, but maybe a short video. Maybe we can take, Janice, you can take your presentation here and make that into a 2 or 3 minute video, that people can hear and see. I think your explanation of what was done is excellent. And so I don't want you to have to do it again, but maybe whoever's in the IT part can cut and paste and put something out there that we can share with folks that will give them a great explanation. I can read it, but if I can hear it and read it, it may make a more powerful communication tool.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I personally don't work in IT and own that presentation, but this will be available for people on the website. Each one of our hearings are public. So once this recording is done, it goes right up on the website. If you want to see any of our past hearings, you can go back and look at those. And this will be one of the hearings you'll be able to view if you want to take another look at that.
And I know there are some people who wanted to join today who looks like they're not on, but if we can repeat this tomorrow, almost verbatim, or even with a little bit more detail, that would be great, particularly on the minority representation.
That's the goal, Greg. And I think we will repeat the presentation and maybe even have built on it by then. I think we can pull that off. I also would say that the commission, we put a fact sheet together when we did our press conference, releasing the maps, about the maps, and sent that out to commissioners. And I'm not sure if we made that publicly available, but if not, I can't see why we wouldn't. And I think that too provides some background information that just looking at the maps can be a little tricky to understand. So you all have that. I know you've been getting a lot of emails from us, as this is a very busy time for the redistricting process, but in the press release that we put out with the maps, there's a fact sheet for you all. It's about 1.5 pages. So you have some of the information, although not in video format. So noted, Tom. I'm going to think about that. And the more ways we can communicate this, the better. So I like that idea. A question about will we put minority breakdown and democratic performance. On the minority, we've been talking about that, and yes, we can put more specific information out. And on the democratic performance, I think that what would be best is if we define our key a little bit better in our shading and put ranges down. For light blue means 50 to 53%. Medium blue means this. So then you'll have an idea of where each district is. So we can endeavor to do that as well. One thing I want to say about the Democratic and Republican performance is this is a composite score based on a combination of statewide race results. And just folks should definitely remember, both on our commission and listening here today, that is but a statistic that is important, but it does not mean that in every single race and in every single election, that district votes, 52% Republican. I mean, that is likely a district that has voted both Democratic and Republican and has Democratic and Republican representatives. So just something to think about, you know, when you're envisioning a partisan makeup. It's one piece of sort of the story to the map and the district, and also shifting and changing trends. That when you draw a map, you gather the data, and you know, you put it together, but it doesn't reflect sort of the moving nature of, you know, campaigns and voting patterns and trends that may emerge, and elections that tend to swing one way or another. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about the red and blue on the maps. All right. I really want to thank, of course, the public who came tonight and who have been providing feedback, and I encourage that feedback to continue. Commissioners, you have been incredible, joining in, helping us with the maps, helping us put our report and everything that we've been working on. I want to thank you for that. And I also want to say that we have our meeting on Sunday. That is our absolute, we need a quorum of members there, 5 o'clock on Sunday. So I know tomorrow at 5:30 may be hard for some of you to make. There'll be enough of us here, but put that Sunday on your calendar and do everything you can to get here for that. Andre, I didn't mean to not see your hand raised, so the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First, I want to echo what Tom Roberts said. I would love to have a video, but I would like 60 seconds, not 3 minutes, but I agree with Tom. But every chance I get, I want to just thank you, Kathleen, Janice, and Greg, for everything that you're doing, not just for our commission, but for all Ohioans. And I want to give a special thank you to my friend Katie. Every time you speak or you give a presentation, I always learn something new. So I want to say thank you, my sister. And to all of my commissioners, thank you for all your time. You know, there's an old gospel song that says, Lord, if I had 1,000 tongues, I couldn't thank you enough. If I had 1,000 tongues, I could not thank each and every one of you enough. So every chance I get, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, friend. That means a lot, and I echo that for my colleagues here, and Katie, Greg, and Janice, and all of you.
And can I just say, yesterday's press conference was very well done. I want to give thanks to Desiree and the team at Innovation Ohio. Dr. Bush was wonderful. She brought forth all her messages. Janice coordinated the whole thing, and of course our esteemed co-chair was able to lay this out to the press and answer some very hard questions. And also, I think there were 2 other commissioners on. I think Ahameen was there.
No. Amina Barhumi.
Right, she was there and she did a perfect job as well. And I want to thank her. And one day I'll get her name right, but I'm sorry.
No worries.
But she did a great job. And thank you for some of you have been in touch with me over the last few days, and thank you again for the feedback you've given, and looking forward to tomorrow's session as well as Sunday night. So thank you, and encourage as many of your friends to join as possible tomorrow.
Yeah, I just want to make one correction. Like Innovation Ohio was not, running the press conference. The OCRC has a comms team, and that was some folks like we have like Mackie and Colleen and Shakina who were on that. So I want to make sure that they get some credit for a lot of stuff that they did there to make sure that was successful.
Thank you.
No, it's okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, I want to encourage the public to join us tomorrow to email in additional questions. And I may see some of you fellow commissioners tomorrow evening, but I know I'll see you all on Sunday. And just thank you all so much. Keep getting the word out, keep getting feedback and questions back to us, and we will do our best to educate folks and spread the good word about, hey, we can get a fair map. We can follow these new requirements that Ohio voters overwhelmingly supported. It's what Ohioans voted for. It's what they deserve. Our map does it, and let's keep spreading the word about how important fair districts are. So thanks so much. Have a good evening, everyone, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 5:30. Take care.